Hello, everyone. It's Imran from the AIN Podcast. It's nice to see you guys again. Today, I'm with Ali Haider. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Iran, for having me on. My name's Ali. I'm founder and CEO of Lilia AI, and we're a medical device venture based in Houston, Texas, and we're commercializing a software as a medical device. So it's a AI software that helps to diagnose brain aneurysms.
That sounds really interesting. Yeah. So, first, I'd like to know how you got into AI.
Yeah, so my path is definitely not the norm. I actually, so I grew up in Texas, in Fort Worth specifically, part of the Dallas Fort Worth, metroplex, and never actually saw myself doing what I'm doing now. I was very focused on a career in medicine. I went to high school in Fort Worth and went to undergrad. And I was pre med at UT Arlington, which is in Arlington, Texas, part of the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. Did pretty well. I got accepted to medical school at Texas A&M. I actually started med school at age 20. I was pretty academically focused and as a medical student, was also even more focused. I did a lot of research. I saw myself as a sort of a physician scientist. Actually, did a lot of research actually in brain tumors and other neurological conditions, including brain aneurysms and stroke and so on. At various top medical institutions in the world. Here in Houston at MD Anderson Cancer Center, which is the number one ranked cancer hospital in America. And then I even did research at the University of Toronto in Toronto, Canada, and at a very famous children's hospital there called Sick Kids, which has a kind of a sad sounding name, but it's actually a very inspiring place. Along the way, I actually had some health issues of my own when I was a medical student, and that's what sort of made me kind of pivot away from that path, because I realized that actually, I can have a greater impact in helping patients by actually developing new technology. And that's where my interest in AI became a lot more serious. I was doing things related to AI in terms of my research. Back then, people called it data science, right? So, I worked a lot with data scientists and computational biologists, to analyze, clinical patient data or, genomic data, for example, of from brain tumor tissue samples and things like that. So I was working with, people like that already. And then, once I realized that, I was actually wanting to focus my career on, creating and commercializing novel medical technologies to help patients, AI made sense, and especially when it comes to things like image analysis and helping to improve, the imaging workflow, and making not only helping with, accuracy, but also helping make things more efficient for the radiologist and the other doctors that are involved, in taking care of patients. So that's what ultimately brought me to doing what I'm doing now.
I see. So, when you were first researching and you said you were using AI, was it mostly like using traditional machine learning models for prediction for, like, for example, maybe diagnosing some disease? One thing I was also wondering about is that when I think of AI in the kind of medical space in biology, I mostly think of just like a disease detection or some sort of detection of some anomaly. But is there like other ways to use AI? Because I know there's things like CRISPR out there as well. So I'd like to kind of expand my knowledge as well and also help the viewers as well.
Absolutely. So, AI, when we talk about its applications in medicine or in healthcare in general, you can break it down into different areas. So there's AI for diagnosis, which is what we're focusing on at Lilia AI. Then there's AI for treatment as well. So AI to help make clinical decisions or support with decision making about okay what's the right treatment plan or things like that. And that's these things are all still kind of pretty early stage. It's a pretty still new area, not in terms of the research, but in terms of actually bringing it to market and using it in real life. Because there's a big gap between what we can do in research and then what actually works in the real world setting. In the research setting, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of applications, like we talked about for diagnosis, for treatment, for gene editing. You mentioned like CRISPR, for example, and AI's become a very hot topic in drug discovery. For trying to screen molecules that can be considered potential drug targets. In all kinds of diseases right now, including many diseases that are incurable. But it has its limitations because ultimately, you know, prediction when it comes to creating new treatments, like for drugs, the real challenge there is how the results come when you're testing out that drug, in a human. And so that's still something that the AI can try to reduce that risk, but ultimately there's still a big gap in what AI can help with when it comes to making new drugs, and what actually is going to work in a real world setting. I think that AI is more useful right now for things like you know diagnosis on imaging, helping with clinical decision support, from taking information from the EMR and helping patients and doctors in that sense. But most importantly, it's something that can really help doctors and nurses and patients, communicate better with each other, whether it's from a workflow standpoint, making things more efficient, and so yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great to see all the different ways you can apply machine learning in medicine and biology. I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends in high school are on the medical track, are on the biology track. And I think it's very interesting to get your perspective because most people who have been on this podcast have just kind of been only in AI or only in computer science and pivoted to AI. So I think it's great to get that perspective. Is there any advice you have for students like that who are kind of on the biology track right now, on the medicine track right now in high school, and are also interested in AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually a question I get a lot from actually medical students and even other physicians right now. Because I'm someone who kind of is at the intersection of these worlds. And yeah, I mean, I would say I think it's very important that if you're on the biology track and you're a student going through that education, that you also spend some time, at least using the AI tools, that are out there, because they'll at least give you familiarity, right, with like the potential and the capability for what's going on in AI right now, in our society. And then as you progress, and if you have an interest, you can then, be in a position to kind of be that bridge between the people with very high domain expertise, in medicine, for example, and then the AI, developers and so on, and actually be that bridge, which is kind of what I do basically at Lilia AI.
Yeah, I think the idea of being a bridge is very helpful as well. So one thing I also wanted to ask is, in general, how do you recommend students to get into AI? Because I know you've done some applied research, for example, but would you recommend, for example, that students start learning about like the fundamental machine learning models like linear regression, logistic regression, some of the kind of fundamentals to AI?
Absolutely. I mean, knowledge is power. I'm a big believer in that. But it's also about, I think, learning, things that are useful for you. So, I mean, one can read about a certain topic or learn about a certain topic, you know, um, academically forever, right? But I think doing both, where you're doing some kind of real world project or real world, you don't have to be necessarily the one doing the coding, but if you're involved with, for example, like how I've been for a while, even during when I was doing research, where I was working alongside, the developers and the software engineers, the data scientists and so on, who are doing the hands-on coding. But it was like I was able to gain literacy in applying that technology to solve interesting problems. And so, and the more you can learn about, for example, the math behind AI, I mean, that is the foundation. That's something I'm trying to spend more time learning about as well. And then also just the terminology, like, what's the difference between agentic AI, generative AI, understanding the concepts, I think, is very important.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I also want to ask about as well, because you're a founder and CEO, and especially because I'm from the Bay Area, many students around me are very interested in becoming founders of their own startups, of course, and AI is obviously very big in the startup space as well. So what advice would you give to those students? Is it wise to start an AI startup in high school? Maybe should they wait, try and get an internship right now or in college and then go?
I mean, I think it's hard to generalize, right? Like, I meet a lot of other founders and, people who are interested in being founders. And, I shared my journey. I mean, this was not something I had predicted, that I was going to be doing. Like when I was in high school, I never thought I'd be doing this. Um, I think that, being I think it's important to, if you want to be a founder, I will say, whether it's something you do in high school or you do in college or afterwards, what I do think is important is getting experience working at a startup, because then you'll be able to really kind of see and kind of learn, about, hey, like what happens in a startup, because working working at a startup is going to be very different than working at a big company, right? A big corporation or whatever. It's going to be very different, and that gives you a good kind of early exposure, even while you're in high school, and it's kind of like relatively easier way to kind of get more experience in that. But yeah, I mean, if you're like, hey, I want to try to do a startup and do some build some kind of software and see if I can get revenue and get whatever experience, sure, go for it. I mean, I would say the best way to learn how to be a founder is by doing it. There's really no other way. And then also, I think the other really important thing, and this certainly has been very important for me, is having people around you as your kind of advisors or mentors who have already been there and done it. I mean, with Lilia AI, we're really lucky to have a world class group of advisors, including multiple advisors who have built and exited multiple companies successfully. And in our industry as well. So that's been tremendous.
I see. So how would you recommend like high schoolers like me or maybe at least undergraduates get positions at startups just to get the experience like you were talking about? Is it just a matter of applying as much as you can? Is it a matter of cold emailing, getting connections?
Yeah, I mean, part of this is, part of the whole startup game is, you gotta just kind of, you gotta hustle, right? And so, yeah, I mean, if there are any connections that, one can have, maybe through your school or through alumni or through people or whatever, where you can get, an internship or any experience at a startup. Otherwise, yeah, cold messaging, just cold messaging founders, or going to events, like, I'm sure I mean, we even have it here in Houston. I'm sure in the Bay Area, there's like tons where there's like, events that, founders are going to, or founders are pitching, right? Those are usually great events to go to. I mean, we go to some of those where we're, speaking or pitching or whatever. And a lot of people, come to talk to us about different kind of things. But yeah, so yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I would recommend that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll kind of pivot here and ask you a more general question, and that's going to be, what's the biggest obstacle you faced on your journey, whether it be in your startup or maybe somewhere before in your research, and what you kind of learned from that, and what advice would you give to our audience based off that?
Well, I think probably the one of the hardest things for me, in terms of starting Lilia AI, and I think is actually a pretty common problem that a lot of people face when they're trying to build a successful startup is finding the right co-founders. Because there is this sort of movement now about a kind of solo founder, kind of thing, but um, depending on what kind of startup you have, we're a medical device, so we're not just AI. We're a startup that requires deep, specialized expertise in multiple different, industries. AI, medicine, our kind of regulatory and business strategy. I mean, it's all like very complex, right? Because we deal with the FDA as well, right? So for us, it was really important to have like a team, and balance. And I mean, if you look at pretty much all the successful startups, including, right, that have come from the Bay Area, I mean, it's been about teams, right? And so, I would say finding the right co-founders for me was probably the hardest thing, in terms of getting started. That's also one of the top reasons that startups don't work out, right? One of the top reasons startups fail is because there's just co-founder misalignment, and that could be because maybe one person ends up doing a lot more work than the other, or personal stuff happens, or people realize, oh, actually, I'm not really committed to this long term, and this and that can cause a lot of issues. So I think for anyone thinking about doing a startup, and if they're looking for co-founders, you gotta spend some time and have some really kind of honest conversations, right? People about whoever you're considering about, what the vision is for this, and that's certainly what I did, right? And so, but that also means, at least in my case, I had to kind of spend some time looking, making sure that I had the right kind of team of co-founders, and once found my two co-founders, I mean, it's we just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things my dad has always told me is to choose your friends wisely. I think it's a very general saying, but it definitely applies here. And it also got me thinking about college because a lot of the startups I see is going to be teammates or classmates from colleges. So, specifically for high schoolers like me, I'm applying this year as well to college. So, what's your advice when it comes to college? Is it a good idea to go to college? Is there a big difference between going to a college like Harvard or Stanford or MIT compared to a state school or community college? What's your kind of thoughts on all of that?
So my personal belief, and it's like my sort of actions have reflected that, is ultimately it's not about where you go to school. It's about you. It's about the work you put in. It's about what you get out of it. It's about the determination, the work ethic, right? Like just making things happen, figuring it out. Whether you go to Harvard or MIT or Stanford or a state school, or so on, like ultimately it's about you. Like you got to make it happen, right? Like I mean, I think college is a good idea. I do believe that, because it's not just about what you learn in college, but it's also about the experience, because you meet people from all over the world, right? Like when you're in high school, you're usually kind of around the same group of people right throughout high school, and maybe you guys are in the same area, like the same geographic area and so on. Let's say you go to college, and I mean, when I went to college, just a local state school. I mean, there were people from all over the world there, right? And so it's a good experience, and in that sense, like you gain a lot out of it, just life experience in general, and but yeah, I mean, it's something to also consider is like cost, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, hey, like, I should aim for the best college I can get into. I would say the best strategy is probably, you make yourself as best an applicant as possible for college, right? And apply, to whatever the best schools you think you can get in, and then see if you get in, right? That way, at least, you can then pick and choose, right? Like, hey, I got into all these great schools. Let's see who's giving me the best offer, who's giving me the most scholarship money, or whatever, right? Because then at least you have the option, you have the ability to choose. So that's what I would go by, because getting a full ride, for example, is important. I mean, I had a full ride to where I went to college, and that helps a lot, right? It also, I think, matters what you're studying. I think if you're pre-med, or like pre-dental or pre-law or pre any of those kind of things, where you go to school, yeah, sure, it can help you, but really what matters the most are your grades. Like, if you're pre-med, your grades and your MCAT score. I mean, I went to like a local state school in Texas, but I had good grades and I got a good MCAT score, so I got tons of med school interviews and I got into a good med school. And I only applied in Texas, because I was just looking to stay in Texas. So, on the other hand, I think if you're, looking at, something like in entrepreneurship or in finance, something related to, it could be like a career in venture capital or investment banking or something to do with tech, um, like where you don't pursue additional, education after college. It probably matters more what school you go to, because a lot of companies recruit from certain schools, like in the Bay Area, obviously, like Stanford, right? Stanford and Berkeley, the alumni network, for recruiting and all that, so yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in my position as well, it's just I think I wish I did more research on all these colleges beforehand. So I definitely agree that maybe if you're in your junior or even sophomore year, just start researching colleges, especially for the major that you plan on going into. Just thinking about the professors there, the programs there, the network and alumni. I think all of that is very important to do early. So I definitely agree with you. So one thing I also wanted to ask is something a bit more general about AI, and that is, where do you see AI in the next 5 years? How do you think it's going to affect our generation, especially high schoolers like me and maybe even people younger than me? Do you think it's going to affect the job market? How do you think it's going to affect the actual work we do in our day-to-day lives? And any other thoughts as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're undergoing a AI transformation in society right now, right? So there's a term called creative destruction, sort of a economic concept, but basically, it's like when some kind of new technology comes in society, right, and then it just causes all these changes to how society functions, including the job market, right, and how just how things are done, in the economy, and we're undergoing that right now. I mean, the way that people learn now is different because of AI, right? Because you got all these AI tools you can look stuff up on, which I can tell you when I was like in high school, we couldn't do that, right? Like, you know, you've got access to all this information in a much better way than ever before. And so it's cool in that sense. It's awesome, I think, because you can learn so much. And I use, AI tools all the time, like especially Claude and Gemini mostly, but, to just kind of, you know, go over questions in my head about certain things. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it's wrong, it still will hallucinate, especially if you go kind of into deeper topics, but it's a good starting point, I would say, and it's certainly a good way to get some early knowledge fast on most subjects. With the job market, yeah, things are changing. It's like jobs are changing. Certain jobs are becoming obsolete, but new jobs will be created. From it. That's what we're undergoing right now. So I think people are in high school right now, and then let's say you go to college, so you've got, let's say, 5 years or whatever. I think the job market's going to look, different than how it looks right now. I know right now, there's a lot of sort of fear and for people who are like looking for jobs, I think right out of college, and even for people who are in the workforce right now, because people who are in the workforce that aren't, really AI literate or able to, pivot towards really being able to, get a good understanding of how to use AI in their work are getting, phased out, so yeah, but I think the future is very bright. I think we're undergoing this process right now, because we're in the early stage of it, and then in the long run, though, it's going to help really advance society.
Yeah, and I asked that question because I think this whole time I've kind of been going into like the technicalities behind AI, but I also wanted to go a bit over how AI might affect us in general. And I definitely agree with you that I think AI can definitely be helpful. It will create new jobs as well. But I do definitely understand why some people are a bit nervous. I was talking to this software developer at Apple, and he was talking about how much his job has changed over the past few years and how it's gone from him just kind of coding normally to having to use Claude mostly, and then really it's about understanding the architecture and system design behind the internal mechanisms that they're working with, and then using that understanding to essentially then be able to prompt AI. But with that being said, I have two final questions before you, for you. So, what the first one is: what's been a surprising or non-obvious lesson you've learned running or scaling the business that you didn't anticipate, kind of with your engineering or medical background?
I guess what's been related to the business, I think the I guess I would say the environment around you or the ecosystem does matter. Like, I mean, with you, being based in Silicon Valley, you know, there's a reason that Silicon Valley's had so much success, right? In terms of this innovation, the AI kind of revolution and all that, because the ecosystem supports it, right? I mean, you've got a certain mindset, and in other places in the country, it's not like that. So you could be very innovative and trying to do this really cool innovation, but if you're in an environment, where most people around you are like, "Hey, I don't really like," they won't say it, but it's like when they see like AI, they kind of scared of it, right? It's going to be tough, and we deal with that a lot here in Texas, and you know, it's just one of those things that I think I've been surprised at how, how much I've kind of seen it, because um, I think people fear change, you know, so yeah.
Yeah, I think I was talking about it before as well. Many people are worried about their future, especially because of AI. But in the end, I think the overall change of AI, it's going to be dependent on how we use it, of course. But I think if we use it correctly, can definitely be an overall net positive. And so my last question is going to be for high schoolers like me, or even undergraduate students who are studying AI or maybe even engineering or medicine. Given your career path, what foundational skills do you think they should focus on?
Well, I think I think with the way things are going, I think that programming itself, like coding as a software developer, is becoming more and more of sort of a commodity because of all these AI tools that can code, right? I think that specialized domain expertise is very important because ultimately AI is a tool, right? Unless you're someone who you're like, hey, my whole passion is in kind of like building like AI architectures and the doing all the architectural aspects of software. That's cool. I mean, if that's your passion, but otherwise, it's like, hey, if I'm like, hey, I want to be an innovator in AI, and for example, in law, right, in the legal space, or in biology, or in applying AI towards like self-driving cars and stuff like that. Having domain expertise, I think, is very important. So studying like the physical sciences, or studying specific domains, biomedical engineering or whatever, or biology or chemistry or physics and so on, I think is valuable, because that gives you this kind of insight into a specific domain, and then you can you know apply AI into kind of the pain points in that area, and innovate in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. When I was working on some machine learning projects, like when I was in ninth grade, I worked on this skin cancer detection app. It was not very good, I can't lie, but I tried my best. And one thing I really did learn from that project was domain expertise is extremely important, because I did not have the domain expertise, and that led to my product not being very good when I showcased it. But it was a good learning experience. So I definitely agree that focusing on not just AI architecture, unless that's of course your passion, but just also focusing on whatever other field you're interested in and getting the domain knowledge. I think that's extremely important as well. So, is there any final advice, anything that you want to say before we end the session?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, again, for the students, high school students, college students, I mean, there's no replacement for hard work. You gotta work hard for whatever you want to achieve, and you gotta have faith, and believe in yourself. I mean, those are crucial, especially if you want to be a founder. You know, so yeah, that's what I'd say. No replacement for hard work, and you got to believe in yourself, and have faith in whatever you're looking to achieve in life.
Yeah, I think with all this talk about AI replacement, one of the things we definitely have to remember is that one of the only things that AI can replace, hopefully, is going to be our hard work. So, I definitely agree with you there. Yeah, so with that being said, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being here. I think we all appreciate your advice. We all appreciate your time. And I hope to see you soon. I hope to see you around.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye bye.